So at this point, there's no one in the front row, so I'm going to move up to the front row. How's that? Hopefully no one sits here now, because it'll make it very uncomfortable. They'll look up my nose. Okay, well, good evening, everyone. It's great to have you here. You want to get into a place where you can see me without a post in the way. We don't have a full room, so get in a place. We're going to be here about an hour, and I want to give you an overall grid of where we're going over the course of this hour. First of all, you should have this handout. This is the handout. It says 3 essential values for healthy relationships, and I'll explain this. This is going to be our grid for the talk. And it's going to be in three acts. And then something just for your information. If you want to know a biblical view from what does the Bible say and what does it mean about these two topics, that's also available in the back there. One starts with sexual integrity, and the other is gender identity. Sexual integrity is front and back. Gender identity is a multiple 5-page thing. These two documents were forged by our elder team as we have studied these over the past 10 years. And specifically, they represent, like just the gender identity one represents about 140 hours of study on the scriptures, reading books, trying to understand what the belief of the secular world was, and then what does the Bible say in regards to that, and then how do we live as a result of that. So this has been a lot of work put into it. On that same hand, we just want to inform you, and there's no way we could go through both of these in 1 hour and explain it and answer all the questions on it. But if you're like me, I'm a parent of children. My children are older than yours. I have adult children, but I'm still learning. I'm still learning on how to parent them well in the season of life that they're in. And so I hope that you'll be a constant learner as we navigate these topics together. One thing we're learning as a church is that as more and more that we talk about this, it starts out awkwardly, just like it will with your children, and it moves to a little bit more familiarity and hopefully more meaningful, okay? And so our goal over the course of these next minutes together is to kind of give you a picture of how to have a meaningful conversation with your child on these two topics, their sexuality and their gender identity. And I realize that many of us have not really done a lot of research on what the Bible says about this. A lot of us had just heard the sound bites of the culture around us. And I can tell you this, if you are just hearing the culture, you are going to have sound bites that just sound good and feel like it's right. And so what I plan to do during this time is to respectfully resist some of the sound bites that our culture has said about sexuality as well as gender identity. And it's not to do this in an angry rant session. That's not what I'm looking at. And it's also to respect and value people even though they might disagree. But I'm a pastor, and that's my expertise. And I have spent my life studying the scriptures and trying to respond to people as they have had the questions of the day. And theology changes every once in a while on how does it respond to different questions that it comes out. And it's the same scriptures that haven't changed, but it has different applications in secular culture. So my goal over this time is to give you a grid on how to have a meaningful conversation. I'm going to be talking, it's in 3 acts, and so the first one is 3 essential values for healthy relationships. That my target for you is what are the values that should guide any meaningful conversation with you and your child. Secondly, I want to talk to you about the soil of healthy relationships in the family, and then ultimately providing the seed for meaningful conversations. I want to put out some topics, and I want to give you the prevailing secular viewpoint of that topic, and then what does the Bible say about that topic. And it's my hope that I can give you a little bit greater, well-rounded picture of what the scriptures say, and then hopefully encourage you that as you have conversations with your child, you're set for as best success as you can. This is something that if you're not intentional about and if you don't endure through, your child's going to just click you off and walk away. And we understand what's happening in adolescence right now. And adolescence is right at the target for both of these topics. And so you are in their lives. We believe God has placed you as the primary person in their lives. We do not take that role. There's no way we could. No way we could as a church. We get an hour on Wednesday night. We get an hour on the weekend. And that's if you come on the weekend. And so all of this is something that we choose then. Our posture needs to partner with parents. And so that's why we're here tonight. I want to partner with you, educate you on what the scriptures say about this, and suggest a route that you go with on your child. Okay? And as always, if you have questions, we'll take some questions at the end. Or if you have a more personal question, I'll stick around. We can talk after. Okay? So let's talk about specifically relating to parents and adolescents. What are some key values in these years? One of the things we teach a lot about here is understanding the season that you're in as a parent. And when your child's, before they're 8 years old, you're in the caregiver, okay? You tell them their bedtime, and most of the time, they understand a bedtime. You prepare the food. It ultimately, hopefully, doesn't matter what they like at that point. You're a caregiver. You're providing them with structure, with resources. You're caring for them. And their dependence on you is pretty high. After 8 to about 16, that's a season there where you're a coach. And hopefully, you've moved away and you've stepped away. You've made the transition of caring for them, and you've not become the helicopter parent that when they drop something, you're there and you're covering for them, or you're in the game when there's a soccer game. Hopefully, you're on the sidelines and you're cheering them on. You're a big supporter. You're an encourager. You understand what's going on in their lives. But again, there's still a level of control, but you're the coach. Once they hit 16, 17, and 18, whether you want it to happen or not, you move into a consultant. And that consultant role is different. In other words, when I saw something and I named it with my kids when I was the coach, they had this picture of, oh, okay, or thanks, Dad, or, well, I don't agree. I mean, whether you were a coach or not. I mean, I could speak. There was good access. There was presence in their lives. After that 16, 17, 18, you move into the the consultant, which the consultant really needs to be asked in before they're heard. So if you keep being a coach in their early adulthood life, they will usually turn you off and not want to share things with you because they kind of know what they're going to get from you, okay? And they don't want you controlling them anymore. And so our help in partnering with parents is help them in their area of caregiving and then make that transition to no longer be in the game, but to be good on the sidelines, coaching your child as they continue to mature. And then when they get to that, again, it's not a perfect 16 years old, but definitely when they leave that house, you're the consultant. And it's not, how can I get in and save you? It's got to be, I don't know, what are you going to do about that? It's giving them that responsibility. So as we talk through this, especially with parents and adolescents, this is the type of values that are going to be a good seedbed for meaningful conversations. And the first one is interest. Communication. I went too far there. Communication. And the goal of communication with your child in any meaningful relationship is that you have the posture of listening to understand them. I don't know how your relationship is with your children, but if you are there to listen to react or listen to correct, that's a different posture that I'm talking about. If you're trying to listen to understand, then there's going to be some clarifying questions with them. You're going to try to withhold judgment to really try to understand what are they going through, maybe where this came from, a thought, how they're feeling, And sometimes you even need to stop and go, honey, I don't know that I fully understand what you're saying, but I really want to understand you. There is a desire in every child, no matter how old they are, whether they show it or not, to be understood by their parents. And you need to be that presence that in your communication, your key value, I need to understand you. I want to understand you. Secondly, speaking to be understood, which means you know your child, right? You know that probably correcting them at 10:30 at night when they've left their room a mess and they're totally exhausted, it's probably not the great time for them to have that corrective conversation. But you're speaking in a way that can be understood by them, or to be understood. You have your tone, you have your posture, more of humility. You see them more, and you give them respect, and you give them dignity as you talk. You don't belittle them. That's speaking to be understood. Your best chance for being to be understood by them and what you're speaking into their lives. So communication is key. Second one is interest. This is really key, especially in a screen world, that if you want to have a meaningful conversation with anyone, it's probably best there aren't screens in front of your face. And when there weren't screens, there was always something else, okay? So I remember my dad reading the newspaper, and he'd get in, because he worked retail, he'd get in at 9 o'clock at night, and he would eat his dinner at 9:30, okay, at p.m., and he'd read the newspaper, and I had 10 minutes with him before I had to head off to bed. And my dad would read the paper. He goes, how's your day at school? And he would flip the paper like that, and he wouldn't listen. He would just be reading the paper, and I could have told him, Dad, I failed out of math and I got expelled. And he would have gone, so you had a good day then, huh? Okay? Interest is important. Eye contact, closing down a screen, muting something. That will create an environment for you to have attention. The second word is empathy, which means you make statements like, that must be hard, okay? Or, wow, I can see why you're so upset. Empathy means I can read you, I can feel what you're going through. And then awareness. And awareness means that you don't just, it doesn't make you the person who becomes the creep on Facebook on what's happening with their friends or Instagram or whatever else you're doing. You don't become the investigator. But you have an awareness of what they're going through in life. In other words, you have talked to them enough that you know what their greatest joy is at this stage in their life, what their greatest fear might be at this stage in life. You have a relational conversation so you know what's happening in their lives. Now, on interest, if you just mark down and just to check these boxes here is, do I feel I give my child attention? Do I feel that I respond with empathy? Do I feel I really know what's going on in their lives? This is time. Adolescence is the time where parents feel the least connected in these areas. So if you feel that way, that's a very normal way to feel. But these are at least putting on your radar for an area for you to go, well, I can't control what they're going to respond, how they're going to respond. I can't control even what they're doing, but I can control myself. And I can take responsibility with it that when you talk, you change my life. In other words, you don't become just an addendum to my life. I stop and I listen. Just that communicates value and significance, interest in them. And the final one is enjoyment. And this is something every kid wants to know. Am I okay? And a parent is there, especially middle school years when so much is changing. So many emotions are going through our children. So many emotions are not being processed by our boys, and so many emotions are overflowing from our girls. I mean, for the most part, you have those realities going on, and to have a parent give words like, this is what I see in you, and have it be positive. Okay? I mean, we all have reasons to look at the negative, but the positive things I see in you, what I love about you, what about them that brings them joy? So our kids right now are on the performance treadmill that is so few and far between and thin line of success that you can win first place one year, and then the next game you lose and you feel like a failure. And we need parents to be engaged in their children's lives so that just watching them play a sport brings them joy, not winning the medal, okay? Now, obviously, I'm competitive. I've been driven since the day I was born, but I have adult children right now, and I can tell you, none of them played professional soccer. 2 of them were on select soccer teams, and I thought they really were going to get a D1 scholarship, which they did not. And all I'm saying is I look back on all those games, and even if they would have gotten the D1 scholarship, my focus was more on them winning than them really winning with me and winning my heart and communicating that with them. And so just from first grade, it starts. I mean, you'll see it in baseball if your kids aren't in baseball. You'll go out there and you'll see that the fathers are far more excited about winning that game than their kids, you know. So enjoyment, your kids need to see that you enjoy them. And I realize these are difficult years, but you need to look even if you can find the 5% that's really awesome about your child, or on those difficult days where they're making it difficult for you and have said, I hate you, or whatever those things that happen on a weak moment, where you're able to not just gush back at them, but to give them a genuine perspective of enjoyment, that you enjoy being with them. Okay. So those 3 things, just keep in mind as you have any conversation, as you're creating the environment as the adult in the room, on what are going to be the values of those conversations. So communication, interest, enjoyment. Second, soil for healthy relationships. I want to give you a grid on if you want to have meaningful conversations about these topics from a biblical perspective, from God's word and God's heart. These things are really key for you to at least be pursuing. And I would say this, that it's never too late to do these. This may all be new to you, but it's never too late to start this. And today can be a blessing for your family in this. And the first one has to do with your faith. And this is really something where in your family, mom and dad are looked to, or even if you're a single parent, mom or dad, you are looked to as the source of truth, the basis of truth, and the source of love. And so when you think about the question of what you want your children to have on these topics, what kind of foundation you want in your children's lives on these topics, we have a saying here at Fellowship that applies to every parent. And it's this: what you want in them must first be in you. If you want your kids to have a thriving faith at 16, and you are not a person of faith, or maybe you identify as a Christian, but for the most part, there's really not an indication of Christ being at the center of your life. That's going to be just really, really hard for your kid to look at that and catch Christ from you and go, I want that, if it's not in your life. And I don't say this from an arrogant perspective. Whatever it is, whatever value, anything you aspire for your kids, if it's not in you, it's going to be a challenge for them to adopt that into their life, see an example of what that looks like from you or from someone else. And so what you want in them needs to first be in you. That starts with faith. And so a question that I challenge parents on when I talk on these topics is, what do you personally believe about Jesus? And how is your life and your family more like him? And the reality to that is, if you don't know and you are kind of lost when it comes to faith, and you maybe have taken what was passed on to you, and it's just you went to church and you just went to church because that's what you did as a family, and that's where my kid gets their spiritual realm. We make this case all the time. You cannot have spiritual transformation without 1 hour a week. There's just no way we can do that alone. And so if it's not happening at home in the area of faith, if it's not happening in your life, it's going to be very, very challenging for your children to even want that, especially when they're thinking more independently and wanting more of an independent life. Okay. All right, next one is values. And when we talk about values, this is what kind of family, what are going to be the values of who you are as a family. And again, I say this because a lot of this is new material for a lot of families. They haven't really thought about, what do we want it to be important to us? And when you ask your kids, what do we want to be important, or what are our family values that we think, many kids can't really pick it up on what that is. So you have to be more intentional. And I realize that as you are parents of adolescents, and your kids are, let's say your youngest kid is in 8th grade right now, and your oldest one is in college. I mean, that's going to be a time where you try to think, oh no, what kind of influence can I have right now in my life? But there's still values to have. There's still values for you to identify in your life and to try to live out with your family. One of the things we did when our kids were young is we had a treasure chest. We got it from Hobby Lobby, and we just put in 4 or 5 things, physical things that were reminders of our family values. One of our family values was hospitality. Another one was the truth, and another one was God's word. And we put those things in there, and those were ways we could communicate to younger kids how to do that. Well, by the time they got into middle school, we weren't pulling out the treasure chest anymore, but they were things that were in there, like kind of saturated them so that when we confronted them on lying, or when we confronted them with, shading the truth or not giving us all the truth, we could just go back to, these are our values that really make us go deep as a family and be a loving, caring family. So your values are that, who do you want to be, that will inform what you do. A question I have for you here is, what values do we live by, and how are they expressed in our relationships together and with the outside world? Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next one. I'm going to go fairly quickly through these because the most time I want to spend is on the final section of this. So we started out with this concept of faith, and then values. And then this one is the culture that you keep. And this is another one, I don't know your parenting style, but I wanted to share with you the different levels of the balance of love and authority, so that when you have a conversation, you can be guided with a balance of them. So a lot of research has been done on family backgrounds and the outcomes that had happened on their children. And again, we get no guarantees. We can have the perfect environment for our kids and they still walk away and do their own thing. What this research, though, for the most part, is the culture that you keep in your home will have an effect and an influence on your child. And we've put this out there let me put this up here, on your level of authority and your depth of love. And these aren't going to be fully in these quadrants, but I'm just going to put up these quadrants of what it looks like to fall on the culture of your home. If you start out on the lower one there of shallow love and low authority, and then you've moved right above there, that's shallow love and high authority. And then you move over to deep love and high authority, and deep love and low authority. So if I can explain what this looks like real quick. Let's start with shallow love, high authority. Very little relationship, high rules, high demands, high expectation, very little love. I don't tell you, I just demand from you, okay? The most common reaction or influence in your child would be rebellion. And a lot of research has been on this as they looked at some of the guys who've done the most damage. They've looked back on their families and they saw very unloving father, high authority, high rules, high expectations, low praise. And so it was just easy to disappoint. You could never satisfy. The kid walked away. Second one is a shallow love and low authority. And this is just not a lot of expression, and this is called neglect. Just go on. The absent parent, or the absent rules, or the absent boundaries. And usually what this moves into is a child that's adrift. In other words, looking for love, looking for some level of structure, but is finding it in things outside of that family. Deep love, low authority. This tends to move a child that has high esteem and low empathy. And what I mean by that is they have a pretty good view of themselves because they can get nothing but praise, but they've never been corrected. They've never had someone say no. So they get to adulthood, and the boss says no. Well, the boss doesn't know what he's thinking about. This is what my mom thinks about me. And they've never been confronted. They've never had that type of accountability. And so what we're putting out here is that picture of deep love, high authority is usually a grounded child. The child that has structure and boundaries while at the same time nurture and care and love and communication along that tends to be the one that has a balanced view of themselves, doesn't have this lack of empathy, but has learned that their actions have consequences to hurt or damage others or to bless and build up others. And so this is the culture. When we talk about culture, this is the culture of a family, that when you have a conversation like this and you notice that instantly your child shuts off, or instantly your child speaks back at you, you might want to look back and just go, what have I not necessarily been balanced with? Or what have I and my spouse, even if you're a mixed family and you have, or a blended family, and your spouse is taking care of them half the time, you want to think through how are we communicating this in a balanced way? Because anyone under your home needs a level of boundaries. They need a level of correction, especially at what age, but they need to have it in the culture of love. Okay, and final thing on this are family practices. And those are traditions, celebrations, and ceremonies as they navigate through life stages. How many of you have graduating seniors this year? Anyone? Okay, congratulations. Yes. Graduation is one of those ceremonies where everyone comes around and you have a moment. You have a moment where you can call out things in your child's life that you've seen over the course of these past 18 years, where you give them a blessing as they begin a new phase in their lives, and things change. Relationships even change after that point. And so you have an opportunity to do that. These family practices, wherever you're at in parenting, they communicate worth, significance, value, and blessing to your children. And those are things that each family will have these. And so a question I have on that is, which repeatable practices that you do reflect your priorities as a family? Because those are what you usually do, from birthday parties to graduations to other ceremonies that you have for your family to encourage them on that. Okay, so when I talk about this, and I've given this as the soil of healthy relationships, what I'm saying is those are things that ultimately, when you have conversations, they build belonging. They build meaning for your child. And as a parent, you have an opportunity to cultivate that soil so that as you have built into them over the course of 18 years, you have a reference, you have a frame of reference as they navigate these two topics. Okay, so we looked at the essential values, the soil of healthy relationships. This is now where we move into the seeds, and we plant some seeds, specifically in the area of meaningful conversations in the area of identity and sexuality. There are four major secular, prevailing secular viewpoints on that are foundational to every person's identity and sexuality. And the first one is this. It's meaning, Second one is identity. Third is purpose. And fourth is belonging. Your children and adolescents are asking these questions. They may not be asking you point blank, but they are navigating the answers, trying to find answers for those 4 words. Okay? And what I want to go through with you on these is to give you a picture of what are they trying to answer with each one of these. What's the prevailing view of culture? And what's the biblical viewpoint in the area of identity and then in the area of sexuality? Because in the area of gender identity and the area of sexuality, they're answering them with those 2 points, with those 2 things. And so we want to be a people that just understands the prevailing role of culture, but at the same time, the response of the scriptures and the heart of God for our children. And I say this to hopefully equip you in language as you have conversations with your children on these topics, with language. And I'm going to trust that as you look at this, and I give you just a few resources to help you with language, that when that time comes, when you get that moment of talking either about their view of themselves, their perception of themselves with their identity, or their understanding of sexuality, especially as it's thrown to them in multiple ways throughout our culture, that you can actually be someone who is a resource for them, a loving resource that helps them be grounded in the truth. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about meaning. And on this page, you have here, it's on page 2 here. It says the prevailing view of what's the meaning of all life? Is what this question asks. And what's the meaning of my life? What's it all about? What's life all about? Your 4th grader would never ask that question, but your high schooler is. They're asking it, and they're seeing a lot of different images and sound bites of what the meaning of life is. And here is the prevailing belief of a secular culture. And so the secular culture basically believes that the meaning of life is determined by the individual. Everyone has the right to decide what is right or wrong themselves and what is best for them without regard to an absolute authority. And so if you see, this is the prevailing view, and this is the majority view of culture. And so when you think about what's the meaning, the culture goes, it's whatever you want it to be. There's no ultimate purpose. There's no absolute authority. And to be told that there is one of the greatest offenses that we could give. And yet, the Bible has a resistance to this cultural claim. It has actually a better viewpoint for as children in their development have an understanding of why. What's the purpose? What's the meaning of life? And so the biblical view on your identity says this, is that your body is good, and although it's broken, it's redeemed as an instrument or a temple to glorify God. Your embodied gender, when lived in harmony with God and others, brings diversity, beauty, and complementary roles that are needed in the family, are needed in the church, and are needed in the world. And as you look at your identity and the meaning of my identity, why do I have, at least in the area of gender, why do I have a body? And why is that body sexed, male or female? The scriptures say, well, your body is good. It's not inconsequential. And there is meaning even in your sexed body. But that body is broken, just like everything else in this world. The God who created it is the God who created it in his image with meaning and value. And so it calls us to see identity as something that's given to us in God, a gift. And we'll get into this on the next one. Secondly, the biblical view on your sexuality from meaning is ultimately sex is God's idea. It's created to unite as one flesh, a male and female, within the exclusive covenant of marriage. Your sexed body is not inconsequential or unimportant, but rather a gift from God to be aligned and stewarded for his glory. Here, the picture of sexuality, I grew up with a picture and even teaching on sexuality that it was bad. Sex is bad, body's bad. And so just don't do it until you're married. And once you're married, I mean, just have no problem, just go at it. And no rules, no paradigm. And the pressure that puts on a couple inside of a marriage is nutso. And so it was good for me as a follower of Christ over the course of understanding human sexuality to lean into the scriptures and really understand, why did God create this? Why does he call a man and a woman inside a covenant relationship? Ultimately, the meaning of marriage was to show God's covenant with us, his church. And it was to show the picture of his unconditional, never-ending, never give up, exclusive love for us as the church, but unconditional love for us in the church. And I needed to know, what's that view? Why do I have these, why is this there for me? Okay, we're going to move on to identity now. And this identity answers the question of who am I? The prevailing belief of culture is this, that identity is perceived by self and to be affirmed by others. Identity then therefore is discovered and curated by the individual. And it all is moved by, you've got to be true to yourself. To deny or restrain your perception of yourself is to betray yourself. This is the common perspective of identity, gender identity even. And the crushing pressure this puts on our children is overwhelming. If you have to discover who you truly are, and that discovery process is on a continuum that has 74 categories to it, and you have to discover that, and it's all on your perceptions, and then once you discover it, you have to project it and at least identify with it, and then have affirmation by others and all the relationships that have to come together to affirm that. It's crushing. It's crushing, especially in the ages where the secular culture is engaging our adolescents on this. Let's move and talk about the biblical view of your identity. The scriptures from Genesis 1:26, where God created you in his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. It shows us that your identity is given to you by God, who lovingly created you in his image with dignity, meaning, and value. Your identity is not fluid, but it's fixed as male and female with intention and purpose. When it comes to your sexual identity, the scriptures are clear on this. You're far more than a sexual being. You're a spiritual being with a sexed body. The spiritual identity given to you in Christ is far more fulfilling than a physical exchange of intimacy. And if you keep reading there, it says, within the covenant relationship of marriage between a male and female, the united couple are to reflect the steadfast love of God for his church. Okay, so on those two, let's just summarize real quick. The meaning of all life, the scriptures would say, to give glory to God. That your body and how God has created you is to ultimately give a greater picture of who he is, rather than just a promotion of who you think you are. And as a parent, there are ways in which you can have conversations about this to where you come back to the biblical basis of this. Now, I will be honest with you, and as we have talked about this and had somewhat awkward conversations as we began to talk about not just gender identity, but human sexuality in the context of church, which were two topics that were never mentioned when I was growing up in the church. As we've had those awkward conversations, and we talk to people and we just ask them, what do you think the Bible says about this? People just were going overwhelming to us. I just don't know. I don't know where to start. And so I'm giving you the end of the story here on all of our study on it. If you want to go through, and I would encourage you to grab those two resources in the back, to go through those resources and learn what the scriptures say about it. It will be helpful for you to have a foundation, for you to have a conversation. Okay? Purpose. What is the purpose of my life? Those are things, again, an 8-year-old's not asking, but a 16-year-old is. And they're given a whole bunch of alternatives or options for them to pursue on what the purpose of my life is. And the prevailing belief of a secular culture is that your purpose is driven by individual desires. I feel, therefore I am. You must do what makes you happiest. You can't sacrifice that for anyone. To deny yourself is to compromise yourself. And so this is what I want to do, is that picture of what the prevailing view is. The biblical view of identity within the area of purpose is that who you are in the eyes of God is far more valuable than what you do. Let me read more here. You are here for more than romance and dating. People are more valuable than making them into objects for your obsession. As a follower of Christ, you follow Jesus in loving him and valuing others to the point of sacrifice and self-surrender. As you navigate this time of life, you need wise and committed others to remind you of who you are and what your purpose is. Now, when we talk about purpose with our kids, it's good to remind them that they aren't fully there yet. And that where they're at not knowing is okay. And to do that in a culture of love and acceptance, for you to navigate that with them and to kind of redirect that focus that might be, I can be whoever I want to be, is a good thing to navigate that with them. And to speak into them with a biblical perspective. A biblical view on the purpose of sexuality would say this: that your life is far more than romance and sex. Those around you who give an appearance of love in their romantic relationships do not have the capacity to commit and endure through the changing emotions and circumstance of their lives. Instead of pursuing love, they can be controlled by lust. This will hurt people and is not kind to their long-term future of relationships. True love for others will require sacrifice. We think about what's the purpose of my life here, and you look at how typical middle school and high school dating relationships go. You can just see couples just getting wrapped up in, who do I have that's important to me? And how am I expressing that they're valuable to me? And we would always say to our kids, especially in middle school, guys, you don't have the funds. You don't have the relational funds to be in a relationship like that yet. And so we always encouraged friendship over exclusive relationships, especially in middle school. And what we asked them, just think about that. And as they thought about that, some of them just were friends with people and formed what's good relationships between the sexes on friendships without having to worry about who's going to go exclusive with who. Now, 2 out of my 3 went down that direction. The other one had a steady girlfriend for 9 months in middle school, and then it all crashed, and he was destroyed, And those were times we could just go, okay, so tell me now, what do you think is wise over the course of these next few years? What do you see happening around you? And helping them interpret that. Oh, this guy asked this girl to go out with him, and then the wind changed, and he's now with someone new. They can see it around them, how finicky these middle school relationships can be. In high school, our kids need wise, loving counsel as they navigate the relationships around them, to interpret what's going on and to speak into, lovingly, but to speak into what's happening in their relationships. Okay, last one here is belonging. And it's important that our kids know who is with me on this journey. Peer groups are very powerful during this time, but I would still say a parent has to be intentional on keeping communication and interest and enjoyment going through these times so that they have a sense of belonging. That whole first part of my talk, those first 2 sections of my talk, guess what they naturally do when you are intentional? They build belonging for a child. They build belonging for an adolescent as they go through that. And so who's with me on this journey? The prevailing belief of a secular culture right now is this: other people are in my life to accept, affirm, support, and encourage me. Those who disagree with me are against me. You should be free to live your life with others any way you choose, as long as you don't hurt anyone. Belonging. Belonging is really finicky, if that's the definition. And if that's how I view people who disagree with me or the plan that I want to go. Now, there's a level to belonging that is every adolescence goes. I like people who just accept me and don't confront me, and you confront me, so I don't want you in my life. But the biblical basis of belonging is really community, that we're better together. You're better when you have a group of people who love you and want God's best for you. And the biblical view of belonging, if you're a follower of Christ, is that you understand who you are in the eyes of God. You belong to him. Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians says that, chapter 6, that you are not your own. You've been bought with a price. So glorify God in your body. It's that belonging. You belong to him. And so a believer in Christ believes that you are God's beloved child, and you're part of his eternal family. You have the very presence of the living God in you. You're never alone. You have the Father over you, the Son beside you, and the Spirit within you. The relationship with God and his family is not fragile, but foundational. God has given you meaningful and lasting relationships in the family you have been given, in your community group, and in some of your friendships. You're worth far more than the appraisal of your peer group. Then finally, when it comes to your sexuality, life is far more than simply romance and sex. Sex within marriage is God's idea and for his glory and for your good. Within all the shifting emotions and temptations of this season in your life, it's best to practice self-control in an area that so many of your peers are living out of control. Self-control is simply saying no to something that's a counterfeit to say yes to something that's real and genuine. Okay, now, I know that for the past 48 minutes, I have backed up the truck and unloaded a bunch of information for you. And I know that some of it has been practical, but a lot of it's been ideological. In other words, what's the system of the world? What's the major system of the world? And how do we have to think? How do we have to think to navigate what's right and wrong, especially as we try to be biblically minded and informed followers of Jesus? This is not easy, and it will require you to continue to grow and mature in this area if you want meaningful conversations. But the majority of the conversations that are happening around here, around this topic, is, I felt this way. I wondered, am I the only one? So I went online, and I realized there's another group of people that think and feel just like me. And maybe I'm in that group. And I think I might be in that group. And the more I read and the more I understand about who I am, and the more that I learn about my quote-unquote identity, the better educated I am on it. And then it's almost fully formed in their mind, and then they bring it to you and go, hey, I'm probably this then. And a parent is like, where did this come from? Because so much of the searching and deciding was done outside of the eyes and the ears and the understanding of a parent. So most parents that I talk to on this topic feel 20 stages behind what's happening in the life of their child. You aren't going to have this kind of conversation as your first conversation, okay? This is going to be after a while of processing and you being up to speed on what the scriptures say and the true identity they have in Christ and the true purpose of their lives as you see it in the scriptures. And that's going to take you time. So this is an introductory conversation that hopefully gives you the large scope of what's happening in our world and how the Bible responds to it, but how healthy relationships and conversations happen in a family on a topic where you feel 20 steps behind. And as I think through that, it is not easy to navigate this one. It's not easy to navigate it. You wonder, you wondered how in the world did this happen? Some parents will even go and put the blame on themselves as they navigate through this. I certainly don't want to elicit shame and guilt by any of the teaching that I gave. I wanted to give you an overview that as you have the conversation, you need to cultivate the soil for that. It won't happen overnight, but it's never too late to start. Okay, I want to open it up for any questions that you might have as you might navigate this personally or any question on things that we talked about tonight. Cricket? Okay, I probably should have had you anonymously text the questions into me so no one would be identified with a question. But I'm up here, and I'm here after if you want to talk. I want to suggest a book here. It's called The Secular Creed. And Rebecca McLaughlin is someone we've interviewed on our weekend services for just information on this and an understanding of a biblical perspective on how you apply it, especially in your family. She suggests a lot of things on here that would be really good in your conversations with people on this, from your children to even friends or family members navigating some of these topics that we've talked to. It's a pretty easy read, but it's packed with language and understanding that, again, you're going to get better as you navigate this. Don't stay away from this topic. This topic's not going away. And this topic, there's elements of it that's been around that Jesus addressed, okay? And they're still around. And until he comes and restores everything, they'll be here. We'll still have relational conflict on these topics. But we need to be grounded in this one, in the scriptures, so that you need a direction personally that you're pursuing so that when your child is navigating this, you can at least provide some wisdom as they navigate through this. So we have these books available. I think they're $5 a piece. They're available on the weekend. If you would like one, just come on up here at the end. I could probably go get some for you before you leave. But it's, again, first, if you've not done any reading on these topics or any thought, then pick up this book. It's a good introductory thing to that. Joe, you had a question?
Yeah, you talked about all the stuff that's coming at the kids from all different directions.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about cell phones for all of us parents? And how
Yeah.
it impacts the kids and boundaries?
Yeah. So let's even just take these two topics and put them to the side and just show how many images are shown to a child on a typical viewing on a cell phone. Again, I see the value of access to your child whenever you need them, and you can follow them on Find My iPhone and know exactly where they're at. But if most of their processing happens through a cell phone, and it's on every topic. It's on every topic. You are able to get far more unprocessed information with an image of something that's not reality on a cell phone. And I'm not calling them the great evil of our culture, okay? But how it's used in your home and how it's used when you pay the bill, you can speak into that. And I always did that with my kids. I go, at any time, I will demand your iPhone or your phone, and I can look at your texts or anything like that. I pay for it. So it is mine that I'm letting you use. And there were times when I knew relationships were not going well there. I said, hey, man, I need to see your phone. And my goodness, I found things from time to time that were shocking to me as a parent. And again, it wasn't an area for me to pound on my kid about. It was an area for me to have a meaningful conversation with. Help me understand what's going on. Honey, this is too much for you at your age to process on your own. That's why it's bothering you so much. So yes, it's something that you can't just give a kid a cell phone my daughter-in-law started teaching kindergarten 4 years ago, and she had kindergartners with iPhones. And the early age of porn viewing now is 8 years old. Again, on a secular picture that there's nothing wrong as long as no one gets hurt. And if you look at that whole industry, there's a ton of people getting hurt over that industry. So yeah, cell phone use, conversations, most of that's happening. And it's happening late at night too. We look at that. So it's good for you to know what's happening on the cell phone. And if you get resistant, that's where high love, high authority, it actually helps a child. Yeah.
I was just, to go along with that, at the last parent night that we had at Surge, they talked a lot about the Bark app, which I ended up ultimately getting. That has been such a huge blessing for us.
Really?
Because we've been able to, I even get alerts when they talk about whiskey prohibition in school.
Okay.
So, you can change the sensitivity if that bothers you, but,
Yeah.
we've been able to have some conversations about texts that have come in, and I'll be like, what was this conversation that we were talking about? And it's just really, because she knows that we get an alert every time. Every time somebody texts LMAO, I get an alert. There's probably a way to change that.
Sure.
It's not, but so it has been really, really good. I don't feel like I'm having to snatch her phone and dig through everything because I'm getting daily notifications. But
Yeah.
it's just really opened up communication about what is being viewed and what is being said.
Yeah.
What's that called? The Bark app.
We had that with our kids' phones, and we didn't have the Bark app. There's another app before that. And it would, I would just say, look, one of the things that it's tempting to think about on a cell phone with our guys, I said, is that you can do something in secret and navigate something in secret that no one else knows about. And so you could live a different way than really what you say you are. And so we had that value of the truth always wins in our family. And so that was just, we were being transparent. Now, I also made them the deal as they went through later adolescence that they could look at my phone anytime they wanted to. Because we wanted to live a life that's transparent. That if I'm going to be a pastor of a church and I've got this side life that I'm living that's not consistent with the way I'm teaching, I shouldn't be a pastor. And they saw enough of my failures as a dad, but that was one area that they had freedom to look at any time. So I think they did once. But just, I think, to see that they could. Someone else, anything? Yeah, Dennis.
Yeah, and this is kind of a loaded question. I hear the cell phone thing. I deal with that at home, and there's probably others in the room, but I'm dealing with it as a single parent. And
Yeah.
gone half the time, and then I don't know. I just can't get a hold of it. And just, yeah, the cell phone thing.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a rule or something goes wrong, it's like you take the cell phone away, the world crashes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes I've had to do it, and it's drama 101.
Sure. Sure.
With the middle schooler, I don't know. I'm not quite sure what to do about it lots of times.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a conversation.
So here, it's worth it. It's worth it for you to do a little bit of research on the influence of constant exposure to spectacular and incredible and awesome and horrific things that they're seeing. I mean, you could see, the algorithms that are on those will literally feed you more of what you've always looked at. And so you like someone jumping a bike and crashing into a rock or something like that. That algorithm will just keep throwing more of that at you so that you lose empathy when that happens in real life. And your regret is that you weren't filming it to get the viral video rather than someone just got hurt. Okay? So those have a way of desensitizing you. It is good to do the research, parents. Do the work. Do the work and find out.
There's just so much of this TikTok and YouTube
Yeah.
stuff that just goes on forever.
Yeah.
Joe, I just want to say, as a youth leader here, one of the greatest things, if your kid isn't going to summer camp, it is one of the coolest things, is we took their phones away, and it was total transparent. 3 years ago when COVID was hitting, Joe, you're familiar with this, but
Yeah.
we took the kids down to Oklahoma. We got away from all the stuff that was going on, and the kids were piling on. Everybody was hearing about COVID and everything else, and the kids responded in a way to where we didn't wear masks all the time, but we did when we were close. But the kids felt like they were back to being normal, and then we had one episode of somebody having COVID, and they were all going back to masks, and the response was we just want to be normal again. And one of the things that the coolest things was all these kids didn't have phones, and they got to interact with each other. So I just want to say that if your kid isn't signed up to go to summer camp, that's probably one of the, as a leader and as a parent, that's one of the best things that you can do for your child for that 1 week, to be away from their cell phones, so that they know what it's like not to have it, but also they know that there's a value in relationships outside of the cell phone.
Yeah. Thanks. So this thing on sexual identity and gender identity, those are conversations. The younger your child is, the easier those are going to be. But where you're at right now, it's still good to have those awkward conversations, but precurse it. Honey, I need to talk to you about this, or buddy, whatever child, we need to have this conversation. It's going to be a little awkward, but I want to let you know that I care about you on this. A lot of the culture right now is not trusting parents with these two topics. So if for fear of getting bullied, and it is true that if your child comes out in a gender identity, a part of the binary, you have to cultivate an environment that still loves, that still accepts, without necessarily affirming, but still creates a safe space. 50% more likely transgenders to attempt suicide. So, and usually an adolescent will do that when they do not feel understood and they don't feel safe. One parent in the home who can come alongside and spend the time makes a huge difference on that number, okay? So at that point, when that happens, there needs to still be a safe environment in that home. And there needs to be a caring, loving parent who is engaged and listening and talking and trying to understand as you navigate that. We have multiple families in our church navigating that thing right now. Yep. And they are providing a safe space, even though they disagree with that direction. We can do it. We can do it. Jesus has been loving people for a long time, even though their lives haven't been aligned to him on that. And so we can do that. We're his church. We represent him. So thanks for being here tonight. Thanks for coming out. And I'll stay after to talk if any of you want to. But can I close this in a word of prayer? Thanks. Father, thanks for each of these parents who are here tonight. Thank you for their love for their child or children. And I trust them with you. This is not easy. But Lord, you honor whatever steps we take to love our kids more and to lead them well as they navigate all these issues being thrown at them. May you work through us to be the people that loves Jesus and lives Jesus to our children. And would you work in their hearts to remind them who they are in you and to follow them and be grounded in you. It's in Christ's name I pray. Amen. Thanks, everyone, for the time.
Thank you for your time.
Sure.